deep in the heart of a dark, forbidding laboratory, a mad scientist toiled away at his latest creation. For years, he had worked in secret, piecing together the fragments of a monster that he hoped would one day come to life. And finally, after countless hours of labor, his creation stirred to life. With a surge of electricity, the monster sat up, its eyes blazing with a terrible fire. The scientist could hardly contain his excitement as he watched the monster take its first, stumbling steps. But as the days wore on, the scientist began to realize that he had created something beyond his control. The monster was a hulking, misshapen thing, with skin that was the color of ash and limbs that were too long and too thick. Its face was twisted and distorted, a ghastly parody of the human form. But it wasn't just the monster's appearance that frightened the scientist. There was something in its eyes, something dark and menacing that made him fear for his life. He had created a monster, and he knew that he could never control it. As the days turned into weeks, the scientist watched in horror as the monster grew stronger and more violent. It would lash out at anyone who came near it, tearing them apart with its massive hands. And as it killed, it seemed to revel in its own power, laughing and snarling with a terrible glee. The townspeople soon became aware of the monster's existence, and they began to fear for their own safety. Rumors of its gruesome deeds spread like wildfire, and soon, a mob was formed to hunt down the creature and destroy it once and for all. But the monster was too powerful, too cunning, to be easily taken down. It eluded the mob, slipping away into the shadows as it continued its reign of terror. As the weeks turned into months, the scientist began to regret his creation. He knew that he had unleashed a monster upon the world, and that he would be held responsible for the destruction that it had wrought. But even as he struggled with his guilt and shame, the monster continued to roam the countryside, leaving death and destruction in its wake. And as it did, it grew stronger and more terrible, its hunger for violence and destruction consuming it completely. In the end, the monster met its match. A group of brave men and women banded together to hunt down the creature, their determination and bravery finally bringing it down. But even in death, the monster left a lasting legacy of fear and terror, a reminder of the dangers of playing with forces beyond human control. The monster of Frankenstein had been destroyed, but the legacy of terror and fear that it had left behind lingered on. The people of the town had been scarred by the monster's rampage, and they knew that they would never forget the horror that they had witnessed. But for some, the legacy of the monster was too great to ignore. A new generation of scientists and experimenters began to delve into the mysteries of life and death, hoping to uncover the secrets that had led to the creation of the Frankenstein monster. As they worked, they came to realize that the monster had been more than just a mere creature. It had been a symbol of humanity's deepest fears and desires, a manifestation of the dark side of our collective psyche. And as they dug deeper, they began to uncover a secret history of experimentation and madness, a legacy of scientists who had pushed the boundaries of human understanding to their very limits. One scientist in particular, a brilliant but troubled man named Dr. Edward Brown, became obsessed with the legacy of the Frankenstein monster. He pored over old manuscripts and notes, searching for the key to unlocking the secrets of life and death. And then, one fateful night, he succeeded. Using a combination of science and magic, he brought his own creation to life, a new monster that was even more terrifying than the original. This monster was not misshapen or grotesque like the original. Instead, it was a sleek, black creature with eyes that glowed with an otherworldly light. It was fast and agile, with razor-sharp claws and teeth that could tear through steel. But even as Dr. Brown marveled at his creation, he realized that he had made a terrible mistake. The monster was uncontrollable, and it was far too powerful for him to handle. And as it began to rampage through the town, Dr. Brown knew that he had created a monster that was even more terrifying than the one that had come before. The people of the town were once again plunged into chaos and terror as the monster rampaged through the streets, tearing apart anything that stood in its way. And as the destruction continued, it became clear that the legacy of the Frankenstein monster would never truly be erased. In the end, it was only through the bravery of a small group of heroes that the monster was finally destroyed. But even as they celebrated their victory, they knew that the legacy of the Frankenstein monster would always be with them, a reminder of the dangers of playing God and the terrifying power of the unknown. The legacy of the Frankenstein monster continued to haunt the town and its people long after the creature had been destroyed. Some whispered that the monster had never truly died, that its spirit still lingered in the shadows, waiting for a chance to strike again. Others claimed that Dr. Brown's experiments had awakened ancient forces beyond his control, forces that would continue to wreak havoc on the world long after he was gone. Regardless of the truth, the town was never the same again. People went about their business with a sense of unease, always looking over their shoulders, always wondering if the monster would come back. But despite the fear that lingered, there were still those who couldn't resist the lure of Dr. Brown's experiments. They were drawn to the power and the knowledge that came with the pursuit of life and death, even if it meant risking everything. One such person was a young woman named Elizabeth, a brilliant scientist who had been fascinated with Dr. Brown's work since she was a child. She had spent years studying his notes and his experiments, hoping to find the key to unlocking the secrets of life and death that had eluded him. And then, one fateful night, she succeeded. Using a combination of science and magic, she brought her own creation to life, a new monster that was unlike anything that had ever been seen before. This monster was not misshapen or grotesque like the original. Instead, it was a beautiful and graceful creature, with skin as white as snow and eyes that glowed like diamonds. It moved with an almost ethereal grace, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. But even as Elizabeth marveled at her creation, she realized that she had made a terrible mistake. The monster was uncontrollable, and it was far too powerful for her to handle. And as it began to rampage through the town, Elizabeth knew that she had created a monster that was even more terrifying than the one that had come before. The people of the town were once again plunged into chaos and terror as the monster rampaged through the streets, leaving destruction and death in its wake. And as the destruction continued, it became clear that the legacy of the Frankenstein monster would never truly be erased. In the end, it was only through the sacrifice of Elizabeth and a small group of heroes that the monster was finally destroyed. But even as they celebrated their victory, they knew that the legacy of the Frankenstein monster would always be with them, a reminder of the dangers of playing God and the terrifying power of the unknown. Thank you for watching this tale of horror and the legacy of the Frankenstein monster. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling stories and cautionary tales. And remember, sometimes the things that we create can have consequences that we could never have imagined.